This conference will now be recorded.
I thought he had it on earlier.
Yeah, well, I'm working on that.
Well, good evening. Welcome, Planning Commission. The clock on the wall now says 6 o'clock. Very, very exciting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Templin.
Here.
Lane.
Here.
Huggins.
Here.
Milburn.
Here.
Maddock. Here. Schultz.
Here.
All are present today.
Item 3A, approve a Planning Commission agenda. I have a suggestion, and I don't know whether anyone's here on behalf of the carriage houses to consider the replat, but it kind of seems a little rude to put them at the very bottom of the agenda because that chances are won't be horribly controversial. Maybe move that to the first item under old business out of courtesy. Does anyone have an
I
objection to
don't see
that?
anybody here from the carriage houses, but certainly can do that. It should be a fairly quick agenda.
I second.
Seems kind of like a bad thing to have at the end of the other discussions.
Yeah.
So, motion, second? All approve?
All
Say aye.
approve.
Aye.
Say, opposed, same sign? As modified, looking for a motion to approve the planning commission agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the planning commission agenda with the noted changes.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Thank you. Item 3B, approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held on August 26th. Oddly, I don't know that I got those. That was part of the package. Did you all get them? Mm-hmm. Did you see anything that's objectionable? Well, I trust you if you're good with them.
Between the five of us, yeah. Justin?
Motion,
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from, yeah.
moved and seconded. Any further corrections or additions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Thank you. Item 3C, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Anything to disclose tonight regarding matters before the planning commission?
Chairman, I'll have to excuse myself from agenda item 5A and 7B as well.
Okay. Maybe just question why 7B? Did you consult with the city on that?
I was in a meeting with staff about a potential project that would potentially need a longer cul-de-sac.
Okay. Totally your call. I was just curious because it wasn't actually an item before us other than discussion.
It could be coming up very soon.
Okay. Anything else to disclose?
Nope.
Item 3D, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business.
I've had some discussions on 6B with Missy and John.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Moving then to call to the public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda may do so at this time. Any presentations for informational purposes only. No action will be taken, and there's a 4-minute time limit. If you'd like to address the planning commission, please come to the podium, give us your name and address. Not seeing anybody leap up. There's no one online. I'll close the call to the public. Item 5A, consider rezoning of tract at 8870 Commerce Drive from OI to M1.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Did want to just say how the carriage houses got 7C. They did turn their plat in after the deadline, so I was like, if you're gonna, so I was gracious to put them on the agenda, but if you do that, you're gonna get put to the end of the line. But
I didn't realize it was punishment. I'm sorry.
all right, thank you, everyone. What you have before you on this public hearing is a rezoning from office institutional to light industrial. Dustin Baker, who's in the audience, is the applicant for this tract. We've had preliminary discussions for some sort of self-storage type unit. However, Just because those are what we've talked about doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. You do need to consider all the potential uses that might be available in the M1 Light Industrial District. Taking care of the signs, the advertising, also notification letters have been sent out, have not received any comments from anybody who was notified on this potential rezoning. As you can see, as the tract under consideration is zoned office institutional, it has multifamily. The residences of Lexington are to the west. Across the street is Rarick Pacific. North is a vacant tract, which is M1, and then south is a vacant tract, which is also office institutional. There is some offices and doctor buildings, office institutional, which is active. It's the third, I guess, or the most southern office institutional tract. And you can see it here on the next page. The surrounding area, the aerial photo, so you can see that there is a use of office institutional in the area. This tract, this corridor is mostly light industrial. However, there is some commercial uses, Harps and Pizza Hut and all those things. Some of them actually are still zoned light industrial, even though they have a commercial use. They did go through a variance or a special permit process quite some time ago, and they've had those uses established. But in this case, just overall, don't see any issues with at least from staff's perspective, of changing this to an M1 use. Like I said, as far as land mass wise, the light industrial zoning in the area is the most prevalent, even though there is quite a bit of mix of uses in this area, including office institutional, but there's, like I said, R3 to the west, and then the other tracts are vacant. So because there is interest in this tract, and there hasn't been any kind of interest since I've been in DeSoto for any of these three tracts, this would be a positive. Moving forward, Commerce Drive has been developed for quite some time. There's utilities, water, sewer in the area, electricity. It's a tract that's just really waiting to be developed. It just hasn't happened, and now is the time. I could go in depth through all these items, but this one is pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned. I've met with the applicant on this item. They've developed a lot of property in DeSoto, have done a good job, so I feel confident that they'll work with staff and create the site plans and all the things that the Planning Commission will ultimately review and to move forward with this development. So the first step in that process is a rezoning from office institutional to M1. So with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions for Brad?
If I'm not mistaken, the track to the west, I guess, which would be on the left-hand side of the picture, that's where those large multiplex apartments are going up,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
correct. Which
Any-
is awesome.
No concern from an easement perspective or anything along those lines in terms
That's
of
also
zoning?
Dustin's project.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's
No
actually,
concerns from you, Dustin?
there is a fair amount of landscaping and buffering. We do have a 20-foot buffer on the apartment side, so there is going to be a fair amount of distance. And then, of course, the light industrial tract will also have some landscaping as well. So there'll be a good separation between the two uses.
Thank you.
Other questions for Brad? Okay, well, this is a public hearing, so at this point, I would invite members of the public who have comments with regard to this application to please approach the podium, give us your name and address, and tell us your thoughts. Nobody's interested. So, no one online. Okay. I'll close the public hearing. The matter is before the Planning Commission.
I'll make a motion to approve the rezoning I need to say the from, to M1, light industrial.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Huggins?
Yes.
Lane?
Yes.
Templin?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Meadow? Yep.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Under our newly modified agenda then, I would move to item 7C, consider the replat for carriage houses number 15. Brad?
All right, thank you, Chairman. What you have before you is actually the final building for the carriage houses. This was approved in a previous development plan. However, it was sort of skipped over. A couple of other buildings were built, and now this is the last one. As you know, that once the building walls are up, that they actually have to go in and survey each individual unit because they are sold. It's a condominium type process, and there are 6 units in here. So this is a replat of the carriage houses, but for this building back here, Building H, there are 6 units. So we've done this 15 times at least previously, so it's just a step in the process so they can now start selling those units and breaking them up into individual tracts instead of one larger tract, which they do just to get the building permit and get the process going. And then once they have buyers lined up with sizes and where they want to have how much space they want to have, then they divide those the big building up in individual tracts, and then it comes back to the planning commission and it is parceled out into smaller units so it can be sold. So with that, I'll stand up for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brad. Questions for Brad? Have you seen one of these before?
Me?
Yeah,
No.
okay. So
Lucky you.
these condos, we have to go through this process. Once they get them built, then they have to come back and replat them so they can sell them.
Okay.
So it's relatively perfunctory.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Any further discussion? Motion?
Make a motion, we approve the final plat as submitted and recommend we move forward to city council for acceptance of right-of-way and easements.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Roll call.
Okay. Schultz.
Yes.
Maddox.
Yes.
Milburn.
Yes.
Huggins. Lane.
Yes.
Templin.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 6A, discuss future land use plan update.
All right, thank you, Chairman. We talked about this item at the previous meeting. I gave you some information on the Johnson County Carnap plan and also the Astor Enterprise Park Development Plan. This really all spun off from the Southwest Growth Area Plan, which is that area from K-10 south to Lexington to now 103rd Street, now Energy Way, which a lot of the residents wanted to see a little bit more concrete evidence of what might go around them so they could start marketing their property and think about future decisions that they might have to make. So we've incorporated the Southwest Growth Area Plan into our existing land use plan and also updated the road network. Now, there's still a little bit of work that needs to be done on the Carnaps. I'm still working with our consultant trying to get some of these line weights and types and everything just right, but we're diligently getting through all that. But really wanted to focus on the land use areas that we think is going to happen in DeSoto. Now, for a long time, we've kind of reserved the east side of DeSoto for large lot subdivisions, the downtown district and the RH zoning, and those areas are kind of the old DeSoto locations. And then, of course, Merck and Lexington Lake Park are to the west. And then, of course, south is Southwest Growth Area, and then also the Astra Enterprise Park. So areas we really kind of need to focus on are those areas, I guess, beyond Merck on the sort of north side of K-10 Highway. We've had some property that's been annexed, that's been zoned commercial. We've got those shown. I do have a couple little adjustments on the city limit lines that need to be added, but also the roadway network, something we want to really distinguish on. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Carnap plan never really got to, what we had talked about was an expressway, like a highway going down to I-35 and through past Edgerton. Looks like now they're still wanting to study it, but it's a 4-lane arterial turn lanes, very similar to what Lexington is. Something we may want to consider is upgrading that to something a little bit higher intensity. Also, there are some changes with Kill Creek. That's now going to be the primary north-south corridor from basically Gardner into DeSoto and up to K-10 Highway, which has now been designated as a 4-lane arterial. And then also Astra Enterprise or Astra Parkway should be a 4-lane road going southeast down to 127th Street. It's been built 4 lanes down to about a little bit short of College Boulevard, just past the Panasonic site. So we've got a little bit of tweaking there to do as well. But so that's where we're at with the land use update. And this, like I said, this was all part of a function of the Southwest Growth Area Plan and making sure that that is something that the residents wanted and felt comfortable with as we move forward with development in this area, because that's kind of the hot spot in DeSoto, ground zero, if you will. But these other areas need the attention as well. And I was thinking more about the 95th and Evening Star area and some of those, that location, which does have the possibility of being sewered because of the work at the Panasonic site. And then also having to take the path that we had to get the sewer lines down to the sewer treatment plant. So there's basically, it's relatively unchanged, but like I said, the Southwest Growth Area Plan, that north, I guess, west area as well also needs some look at. And then we do have that very large chunk of purple, which is mixed use. And I know we've had some discussions about, do we really want to have that much mixed use? But yeah, that's Astra's Park. They just sell multi-use as well. So they're probably okay with that designation in that area. I've not spoken with anybody with Sunflower Development. I guess they still go by that. But so really, it's just a discussion item. I'd like to have a public hearing on this. No, actually, pardon me, we've had the public hearing, so now we're still in the discussion stage before we make a recommendation to the city council. After this moves forward, we'll proceed with an overall comprehensive plan for the city of DeSoto based on some of the findings that we've had. We've updated the zoning map, we'll updated the land use, so we can give our, probably be a consultant that we'll work with to update the whole comprehensive plan, but this kind of gives them the basis to move forward. And there'll certainly be another, bite at the apple when we come back around to this, probably in about 8-9 months. But this is where things stand now. We just want to make sure that the Southwest Growth Area Plan was incorporated into our current comprehensive plan before we go on with the update. So with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Question I have, Brad, is the area, I guess it's north of 95th and like between Lexington and Sunflower. Is that included in the Southwest Growth Area?
Yeah, that's the whole sort of, yes.
So essentially the stuff that's shown in there, I mean, essentially anything in the Southwest Growth Area is just essentially copied from that exhibit to here.
Correct.
Okay. So we're really not focusing on updating any of that stuff. We're just kind of go with what the consultant recommended.
Yeah, and so that's why we're looking at these, I guess, broader areas.
Okay.
And we talked about this a little bit. Our area of influence basically goes from Gardner Road. Even though that's unincorporated Johnson County, we're not really focusing on that, but it's an area that we've established through previous planning efforts going back to the early 2000s. This is kind of where DeSoto needs to focus our attention. But while, like I said earlier, the hot spot is the Southwest Growth Area and some of the ancillary areas where utilities are now available, primarily sanitary sewer lines, to allow for development, a more intense development than just rural agriculture or large lot homes.
Okay, I guess, did you just submit this updated plan? This is something, that's a newer plan than what I have printed out. I might not have printed the latest one. I was just kind of focusing on the stuff that was just rezoned.
Well, this should be the one that's been posted. I mean, I can go back and double check that I emailed.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. I was gonna ask questions about that corner, updated. So
Which corner are you looking at?
I'm looking at the north side of K10 at Evening Star. The printout that I had, probably the old one. Brad, you probably just updated it. There's some of the stuff
And
that's
that one
been
we haven't
rezoned.
talked about. I mean, we said we were gonna talk about it, we haven't talked about it.
Okay.
I kind of feel like we should just dedicate an entire commission meeting just to this, because this is like, to me, it's overwhelming as a single agenda item, just to say, yep, looks good. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are, or what precedent is here.
Well, I don't know that we're at a final version, because I don't think we've had that discussion. That was the part that I flagged too.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, and I think some of it looks like it's been updated from what I printed out. I think it was just, you just sent it out like a draft form on Thursday. And that's the one I printed, and I think it's been just updated because it looks different than what I have. Which is actually what I was gonna point out. Some of those recent rezonings that have come through, now it's been updated to commercial.
Yeah, and that's also that area that the city limit lines, the black dashed areas need to be adjusted a little bit. And like I said, it's been just back and forth working with our consultant on getting those lines right. So I do apologize for
If I
that.
could, just kind of a reminder, the reason we brought this initially was to incorporate the results of the Southwest Growth Area Plan. So we have the plan, it's finalized, we've accepted it, but it doesn't represent any sort of formal policy document within the city until we formally incorporate it into the comprehensive plan. So that's thing number one. Coincidentally, subsequent to that, we have the completion of this transportation corridor study that we've been doing with the county and several other jurisdictions. So that's why the road stuff got in, really. And I think the primary focus of this was, let's just incorporate the recommendations of these two studies and just get them in our comp plan. And that's why this process didn't get preceded by work sessions or normally we come together, we have public input, we have, we're putting stickers on maps and we're all this business. We did that within those kind of context of those two. So that was the primary thing. And then, as you start to look at this, we've kind of snowballed, maybe got a little bit fuzzy to what we're trying to do into these other areas like you're talking about now, which we haven't really had this discussion. I think that's, it's just sort of a scope creep, I guess, on what this agenda item has been. Maybe it's worth saying, let's just do what all the engagement stuff was on the Southwest Growth Area and on that transcript. Let's just get those. And then, within the context of a bigger, because we do have budgeted money budgeted for the rest of this year and next year, to do an overall comprehensive plan revision overhaul. So, Brad, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Now, I guess adding on to what you said, Mike, the part of the reason that I kind of did the scope creep, so to speak, is there are things I hear from Planning Commission over the course of the last 3-4 years that, maybe we ought to do something about this on the future land use plan. So it's like, well, let's go ahead and maybe take care of some of those. I like the comment about all the mixed use that was on there.
I get it, and we get beat over the head with the future land use map every time it comes back. So I do think it's important to do it, but I think Mike's right. We haven't had those discussions about these other changes outside the Southwest area growth. And before we start just flipping colors, we probably ought to have that discussion. I think that's a good point.
And I think the other big thing is Astor Enterprise Park.
Yeah.
Because, they've had this, I'm just playing this, this is the SRL's kind of marketing document that has been out there in the public. And I think in general terms, I don't think anybody's necessarily opposed to this sort of thing, but it's a lot of mixed use, like you were saying. Our current future land uses, it sort of semi-resembles what that is, but it's not an exact match. So that's another sort of main topic item that we need to workshop, right? We need in the context of more than just an agenda.
And I don't think that the public hearing we had on this previously covers all that. I don't.
Really? I mean, technically, sure. We're
Yeah,
changing the map.
A little
Technically,
uncomfortable
yes.
with that.
Can I make a comment, Chairman?
Sure.
This is Patrick. In order to incorporate this future land use map, unfortunately, we will have to do it via the statute. There's no other vehicle different than the zoning map, because there we weren't making any changes. We were simply incorporating changes that had already been made. Here, since there are changes, we'll have to make it part of the comp plan through the statutory process. But as Mike says, it can be, everyone knows it's subject to change, all that. But just wanted to make that comment.
But if I had my druthers, I would say that what we're gonna present as part of in the action item here you're looking for is a final version to be brought before the planning commission in October. I would say we should probably only have the changes reflected by the Southwest Area Plan and maybe the road network. The other things that we're talking about, I just don't think we've really vetted those. That's my view.
So I fully agree with what you guys are saying. We tend to lean on this pretty hard in terms of whether the determination of approval or not. And I feel like that's one of the charges of sitting on the commission, is making sure that we're being good stewards of the people that we represent. So, that's why I wanted to spend some more time on it, because I do think it's so important.
I think you're right. And worse than that, it is thrust at us.
Yeah.
If somebody proposes something that's consistent with it.
Not necessarily just the people that we represent in the city, but the people on the outer edges there that
Yeah.
are affected by the decisions
Right.
also. Like, there's up there off of between 95th and 103rd off Edgerton Road, or Evening Star.
Yep.
Where all the multifamily is right now. That's all farmland, and a lot of those people were out here at the last rezoning deal. And if they were involved with this, I don't think that would be a brown area with multifamily.
So if you're looking for direction, we have a consensus. Bring it back to us with the Southwest Area Growth Plan and your road updates. But let's don't mess with the other areas until we've had an opportunity to vet them.
Okay.
I agree.
Agree. That's our formal action item. Discussion. Moving then to 6B, discuss home occupations, limited retail use in a residential zoning district.
All right, thank you, Chairman. We had this discussion at the previous meeting when this issue was first brought forward to city staff, and there's just a lot of different ways to look at this. Part of it's no harm, no foul, or is it something that is basically a zoning rights issue? If you're in a residential district, no retail sales. It's just for home occupation only. So I did look at, gave you some information from the city of Gardner, and they don't allow retail sales in residential districts. Olathe has a way to do it, but it's very bureaucratic, so it probably is a way to kind of say, no, you can't do it, but it's just very difficult to get around there. But in DeSoto, we've got such a unique community where we've got large tracts where you can do a lot of different things with limited impact to your neighbors and residences. We're not talking about a downtown district or the RH district where there's fairly dense population, smaller lots, things like that, versus 5, 6, 10 acre tract where you can have multiple people coming and going in cars and really not have much of an impact at all. So that's the discussion that we need to have is residential, solely residential. And there are some exceptions. Gardner does have one if you're doing a mail order business or it's entirely contained within your household. You can do that. And Patrick brought up a good point. We were talking earlier today. The reason you have no accessory buildings, things like that, because at some point, if the business gets too big, it starts impacting your life as a resident, as your house, and you want to ultimately move to a place where you can expand your business. So it's sort of a intrinsic check and balance within that as well. And there's a lot of people we've talked about are doing internet sales and things like that that have no impact on the use of the neighborhood. They're just the neighborhood. They don't have customers coming and going and things like that. So that's really the distinction between all of this information that we're providing. And we've got a few of these items that are cooking right now within DeSoto on some exceptions that you can say, well, you know, we're a community that tries to find ways to allow people to, you know, use their property and in a freedom manner where they can limit impacts on neighbors and residents around them. And if the residents around them are okay with that, then maybe we can proceed. So what we have suggested is, and just need to get input from the Planning Commission, is a special use permit process for residential retail sales, which would allow an accessory building. I think that's one of the key distinctions between what Olathe and Gardner have, is Gardner is just, no. Olathe does allow accessory buildings, but as I said, it's kind of a tough process to go through, a lot of steps that they have to go through as well. And they also, Olathe doesn't allow employees on a retail basis. It needs to be the resident operating the business. So if you start looking at some of the things that we have in our code about home occupations, we do allow space for one employee. So I've put together just a suggestion for a special use permit process, and it does sunset after 2 years. Certainly, what we've shown is a 2-year special use permit with a potential extension for 2 years, which would be an approval process by the Planning Commission. Doesn't necessarily have to have a public hearing and notification, but it would allow up to 4 years for a retail use in a residential district, provided that, you know, some of the other things we have in there is that it's not a nuisance. There's not, you know, coming and going too much activity where, and there's no off-street parking. All those things need to be taken care of in context, so it does protect the surrounding neighbors' rights. As far as, unless I want to live in a residential district, I want peace and quiet. I don't want to have customers coming and going. And so that's kind of the balancing act we're trying to provide here is, and then this does come down to a lot of, you know, we've got these large lots on the east side of town where you can do a lot of things and not really impact your neighbors a whole lot. But when you come across these policies that then flow into somebody's house who's just maybe a half acre and they can somehow squeeze a way in there, all of a sudden you've got something that maybe we don't want. And we don't want to go down this slippery slope and then all of a sudden have too much retail activity in a residential district. So we're kind of trying to thread the needle here with a resident that has put some effort and time into developing their business and has an accessory structure, and they've done a nice job of fixing it up. And it's, by and large, I mean, it's just a nice little cozy feeling type of a location, but it kind of talks about this bigger picture of retail sales in a residential district. And we do have some inconsistencies, as the chairman's pointed out. We don't allow antique sales or secondhand merchandise sales, but you can sell brand new stuff all day long. So it's kind of, so with that, I'll just open it up for any kind of comments, because we're going to have, we just need to kind of flush these issues out before we hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the city council, which is what you've been charged to do by the council.
Brad, I appreciate the effort. I think this is a good step to where I think this probably should go. That said, I've got some questions. So the language used is that permitted home occupation shall not in any event include the following: retail sales by special use permit. Probably should be retail sales except by special use permit.
Okay.
And then with conditions in addition to section 12, but then we're modifying section 10 on the proposed language below.
Yeah, well, the home occupations is in a different area. And that's the other thing that sort of drives me kind of a little bit crazy about our code. Not just ours, all city codes have
Okay.
a section on this and then, but C section here, and you got to bounce around. And
So section 12 wasn't provided to us. Is there anything in section 12 that's relevant then?
well, section 12 is I guess the proposed area, the
12.
proposed
Oh, this whole
conditions
thing is
is
section
appendix
12?
C zoning regulations. The other
Yeah,
part.
this whole thing is section 12.
Yeah, that whole thing is section 12, except for the red area on the bottom of
So
the
in addition
page.
to the provisions in this, you'll also have to abide by special use permit.
Right, and then special use permits is its own section, so that's where that would show up. So you've got,
Then on the special use permit, I mean, I think the idea here was that they would have off-street parking to accommodate folks. Is there a reason we wouldn't allow for on-street parking? I mean, should we say specifically special use permit, but no customer parking on the streets should be permitted?
yeah, we can certainly strengthen
I
that. and
think
say-
we probably want that, because that's probably the most likely thing that's gonna generate complaints, is people parking up and down the streets to go to the retail location. And then my last question is, why have it terminate after 4 years?
Thank you.
Well, I guess my thinking is, I don't think we want to have this use continue. It's either at some point your business grows and you move to a district that is commercial. We don't want to have, at least my thinking is, we don't want to just have this perpetual retail sales in the R1 district. And this is some influence by Commissioner Milburn, who had brought up at the meetings, like, residential is residential. And if you come in at a later date and you don't want that there, you kind of negate some of the issues of why you have residential districts.
Why 4 instead of 6? Is there just?
Man, there's no magic to that. I just figured, if you're gonna make it, and you're gonna make it in 4 years, we'll know by then if you're gonna.
Okay.
So if.
So there's
if
no
it
magic to that.
sunsets, can they just come back and apply again?
They could reapply, but then they'd have to start all the way over with a special use permit.
It's not a renewal at that point.
It is not a renewal.
If they're happy just having a little business there, then I'm not too sure about why we need to sunset it myself, but
I mean,
it's not causing any problems.
I think the size of the building is gonna limit whether the business gets bigger, because they're not gonna add on to the building. And
Well, if there's complaints, you can always bring them up in
Well,
2 years.
Yeah.
with the,
Right.
with the special use permit, to me, if everything is going as planned, I don't see any reason to limit them.
I would agree with that.
I would agree with that.
That's kind of the object of the special use permit, in my opinion.
Okay, so I mean, all the comments that Chairman Timblin made, I agree with, but I'm just gonna step back again at a 10,000-foot level. And I honestly don't agree with having retail sales in a residential area. I mean, staff's done a great job doing research. They looked at Gardner, looked at Olathe. We're not out of line with the stuff that we have on the books right now. So, I mean, if they had that stuff and they allowed retail sales, fine, okay, we can make some adjustments, but, honestly, they have the right to private enjoyment of their property in residential areas.
But you would also complain if it was an issue.
I understand.
So, and that could pull their permit, correct? Or bring it up for advisement.
Yeah, I know.
So,
But, also, you got to think too, myself, if this goes through, my neighbor on the other side of me has a right to have retail sales right beside me. So you got to also think that too. So, I mean, if this goes through, we got to be happy with our decision. We did allow retail sales in residential areas. And I mean, honestly, that's the reason why we have planning and zoning, is to keep these uses separate. And again, I want to echo some of the comments that I had on the last meeting. I completely agree with this homeowner. I wish them the best of luck with their business. I do, because I started my business out of my own home too. And I'm really split on this, because I agree with it, but I don't.
I think you're also kind of in ways thinking when your business has progressed, you had ultimately had to purchase a building and move out of your home.
Yes.
Because it became to a level where it was no longer, I guess, palatable for you and potentially your clients to
But then
operate
we had
around the
our
house.
photography business at our house, and we didn't want it to grow. We just
Right.
wanted to
Understand.
do the local thing, and just, so we weren't really
Right, but
interested in.
that's allowed under our current code.
Right.
Just having a,
Yeah,
It's different than retail.
well, okay.
But I mean, this position, I'm sitting right here as a planning commission member, not a business owner or, so I'm just doing my job.
Maybe just to, I hear exactly what you're saying. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea that there are certain things you don't want to have in a residential area. And retail would be pretty much top of my list. Don't think I'd want it. I get it. That said, I think our job also is to respond to the needs of the community and to see if there is a way we can facilitate it in a way that's not going to be disruptive.
Right.
Which is, I think, what we asked you to do, and come back with some sort of a special use permit process.
Yep.
I personally think this is the right way to address the issue. And, you know, I don't see the community clamoring about it. Sure, is this gonna open the door? It's possible, but you got 300 square feet they're working with. So you're not gonna be able to open a large retail establishment in the neighborhood.
It's not a mini Walmart.
It's probably gonna be more like the hobbyist who wants to do this and call it a business. even
Exactly
though
what
maybe-
it is.
And so, to me, this isn't offensive. My question about the 4 years is just, it's a random date, which I think we recognize. I don't know whether 4 is appropriate. I do agree with your idea that if it is successful, they probably should move to some place where they can do it more effectively. But I think you're gonna find people that do this just because they really love doing it, and it's just their hobby. So, it's more of a hobby retail, I suppose, but should be permitted or not. Other cities say no. I totally get that. But I think we do have at least a need in the community where people want to try to find a way to make it work.
Well, and they want to make some extra money with some of these things, so.
On the business being successful and putting it in a different place, they've looked at places in town. There is no place that's affordable.
Affordable.
Well, that doesn't help me with that issue.
Yeah.
Well, but you should
And they looked at
consider
several
that.
places in town and there's.
Yeah, I mean, merely
not a
because there's
whole
no
lot.
other option that's affordable in town, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and
Well,
erect my own shack,
yeah.
and that doesn't make me want to do it.
Well, that brings up a point. Are we going, does this building, whatever building they do, does that have to meet codes as far as
Well,
the
that was gonna
building?
be my question about emergency vehicles or ADA or anything along those lines. Does that trigger anything?
Accessory buildings are pretty wide open in this town.
yeah, they really are.
So it doesn't have to meet codes or anything.
Well, we would have some basic fire safety codes, certainly that would have to be met.
Yeah.
You know, we have to have your fuse box and all those things inspected.
And they've identified things that they need to change and they're more than willing to do that.
Well, that's good, but I'm talking about for anybody else
Yeah.
that comes up and might want to, because with
But I think you do raise a good point on
Right.
the ADA accessibility. Maybe that's something we add to.
You know,
First of all, I like the idea, and I'd like to try to figure out a way to make it work. I just want to make sure, with echo what Linda said, is if we're going to open up the box, we should probably make sure that it's well defined.
which also brings me to the point, what about, you know, little farm stands that are popping up and flower stands and people are selling produce and stuff on the sides? Is that all, where does that fall into? Is that something that's gonna require a special use permit, or where's this stuff coming from? Because that could be the same thing. People are gonna, I've seen several things where people are selling baked goods and different things alongside the road. I mean, where does this get considered?
Yeah, well, that's also gonna take a little more research, because you do see, I see those as well. Some of them are, on the honor system, they just have a
Yes,
little,
absolutely. They're trying to help.
little
their neighbors
building, and they grow
make a little
tomatoes
money off of
and
it too. Yeah,
cucumbers and,
sure.
To me, I don't consider that a home occupation, but if they're bringing in fruit from Georgia and selling it
No,
by
they're
the
just
side, that's
selling it
different. They're
probably from their own
selling it from their own
stuff.
garden. I don't know that I'd necessarily consider that a home occupation.
Okay, so it's still putting up a stand though, if they make a little stand and put it up next to
Well,
their,
if they're gonna erect a stand, then I think it's
Yeah.
potentially an issue. I would agree
that's
with
what
that.
I'm talking about. I'm seeing them with a little stand on wheels so that they can move them
Well,
around.
but moving around is different than a permanent structure. I mean,
You're good with that?
I don't think somebody who's gonna put up a lemonade stand and use a cardboard
No, I
table
don't mean.
is a problem.
No, I'm not talking about lemonade.
I mean, whether they're selling tomatoes or lemonade, if it's something they take in every night.
But if they don't take it in at night and they're
Well, then I
leaving
think
it there
it's-
and they're stocking it, that's my thing.
I would agree. That's an
Okay.
issue.
So,
But I also don't think it's permitted.
well, that's what I'm trying to open that up for conversation
Right
right
on,
now.
right
Since
on.
we're talking about these type of things and allowing a little building, would this be applicable as well?
I think the produce stand, there's a separate provision in the code for street vendors like that addresses those temporary, and they do have to get a permit. There's a process, there's a license application for those. There's size restrictions. Those are addressed separately.
Okay, even if it's on their own property and it's not public property? Okay,
That question, let me do a little reading, I might have an answer here, but
okay.
yeah, they're separately
This
addressed.
is Patrick. I have a couple comments, if you don't mind.
Sure.
No, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, with this, I just wonder, so are we gonna have an acreage limitation in order to apply, or just keep it wide open? That's one question I have for bringing this back.
So I think to a certain degree, the minimum off-street parking, including 2 spaces plus 1 for an employee, probably takes out the small lot from that.
Yeah, 'cause they've got 8 parking spots.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, do we need another restriction on top of that?
No, I was just throwing it out there, would we limit it to, you have to have sufficient, a minimum acreage before you can even do this? But maybe not, we can just address it, but then, secondly, I wonder if limiting it to an accessory building no larger than 300 square feet is going to be a problem from the standpoint of the resident that we talked to, before we pursued this text amendment. At one point, he talked of putting that small building inside a large building that he has on the property, and that made me think that, particularly larger acreage properties, I could see them having a larger accessory building that maybe they just want to use part of it for a home business. So it just seems like under this language, even if you were just using a corner of that building, you couldn't do it because your building's over 300 square feet. Good point for discussion.
Well, at the city council meeting, didn't the mayor mention like a 5 or 6 acre limit on it?
Yeah, I think one of the suggestions was some limit in that range, I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact.
I brought that up at the
Somewhere less
last
than
one.
10 acres, yeah.
Seemed like that would, because if I remember right at the meeting, they said if they did that, the 5 or 6 acres, that would limit to possibly like 18 properties in the city in that zoning category, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you narrowed it down quite a bit.
And a lot of them are in that neighborhood, so.
I actually kind of like that because I feel like that partially addresses Justin's concern too.
It helps with the concern.
You're not easy to please, so helps is good.
On this issue.
thrilled about the sunset thing on there, but
No, never mind.
I know what Missy's intention is. It's a micro boutique in honor of her mother. I don't think
We
she
gotta
wants,
think
she doesn't.
outside the box.
I
We're
know,
not
I know,
focusing on
I
her.
know, but-
We're thinking out. We've gotta keep everybody in mind for this.
Could we tie it to a, go ahead. Could we tie it to a zoning? This RORA zoning?
See any reason why
We
not?
talked about that. And just to, for discussion, like I could see this, any residential area, someone wanting this. So it seems like if we limited it to 2 zonings and someone, you know, would it be worth them rezoning? Or I could see them saying, well, you know, if it's allowed in one residential zoning district, what's the justification for not allowing it in all residential
I would,
zoning districts?
Size, lot size.
Well, then stick with the lot size
Yeah.
limitation, if that's
Yeah.
what you want to do.
So if they're gonna have to do off-street parking, is this gonna meet city standards for commercial parking?
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but we do allow campers, things like that, to just be hard surfaced, which can be compacted gravel. So that, my thinking was compacted gravel counts as off-street parking, but we might have to
We
put
probably
that,
want to clarify that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not allow on-street parking, does that mean there's no parking in front of these houses?
Not customer parking is the thing I was saying.
Sounds like an administrative nightmare.
Well, if it becomes a complaint, if it becomes a problem, then you have a way to deal with it. I guess that's all I was trying to give you a tool.
Yeah, I guess my only fear, and, once again, you can slice this up how you want, but then the resident parks their vehicles on the street, and then they say, oh, I got parking in my driveway, so I meet the requirement.
No, I wasn't shopping, I was at my friend's house.
So you're right, Commissioner Huggins, the more we try to shoehorn this in there, it does make it more difficult for staff to try to enforce.
So, this is a discussion item. Did you have enough discussion to bring something else back?
Yeah, we can certainly, the things that you've talked about, the
Although we
acreage.
don't necessarily reached consensus on anything. but-
Yeah, but I do think things about maybe putting in there must meet applicable building codes. I do think the ADA requirement is something that needs to be likely included. And then, the paved parking potentially, we can have that discussion whether it needs to be compacted or it needs to be actual concrete or asphalt.
And consider a minimum acreage requirement.
did we come to a conclusion on sunsets yet? Or where are we gonna go with that?
I would like to see the sunset go away.
Well, and that's the other thing, if you're gonna require them to put all this upfront money, probably need to extend that or potentially eliminate that. But then it becomes a, sort of a perpetual right as long as they're in that spot, which I guess
Do they
is
still have to renew
a
every
challenge
2
for
years,
Commissioner
though?
Milburn.
Do they still have to renew every 2 years?
And we
I
could
would-
certainly have that
I would
requirement.
say, from my opinion, they'd have to renew every 2 years.
Yes.
Well,
So
yeah,
if
and
we
I
don't
think,
have a sunset date and they have to renew every 2 years, if they have complaints, then we've got an option to address
right.
it.
And if you're limiting it to a certain lot size and larger, you're already gonna narrow down the selection quite a bit of what eligible, yeah,
I would agree.
yeah, okay,
If it's not transferable, subsequent owners,
right.
I don't think they would have an issue with that either.
Okay,
Are we good?
I am.
Maybe.
We'll see you next time.
Well, then, let's talk goats.
Okay.
Item 7A.
All right, yeah, we've got some interesting discussions going tonight. So we've talked about, I guess, we haven't talked about formula at a meeting, but I'm sure you're all aware, there's a couple of goats that have been as a residence at 8510 Wea Street. Apparently, they've been there for several years, and nobody really noticed. I mean, I guess people knew. I knew some members of the staff kind of thought it was cute that there were some goats and didn't really think twice about it. But at a council meeting, the mayor received a complaint about the goats, and a lot of our policies are complaint driven. So we looked into it. Sure enough, there's a couple goats there. And if you look at our current policy, goats are considered livestock, and they're not allowed in tracts less than 2 acres. And interestingly, this did come up before the planning commission. I think Commissioner Lane was the only member still on the planning commission, but we did recommend, and it was adopted, that livestock, because we do have policies, you can have cows and horses, all sorts of things in DeSoto, but you have to have the right amount of acreage. The planning commission at that time felt like goats were livestock. I mean, they're not pets that you bring into the house, and those need to have a minimum acreage requirement. Now, of course, there is a lot of information out there that says goats don't need a lot of acreage. And you've got that information from Douglas County that was part of the packet that I gave out about 7 or 8 years ago. That shows that you can have goats on less than that. And then, of course, we did receive a lot of information from the property owners and also surrounding members that support the goats being here in DeSoto, that you can have goats on quite a bit less than 2 acres. So this also puts us in this sort of where we want to accommodate our residents, and once again, no harm, no foul. Nobody seems to think that the goats are a problem. They're not. I guess, as Commissioner Timpson probably had to look this up, but goats bleat, is that right?
You obviously don't get much internet use. Because there are videos of goats bleating all over.
Okay. So we have not had, noise problems or odor problems or goats getting out problems. So they're pretty happy and content where they're at and what they're doing. So that kind of gets that whole no harm, no foul kind of approach. Or do we, talk about, hey, rules are rules, and that's our job to establish these lines. And so you can see I have the information from the Nexa, and goats are not allowed. They're considered livestock and can't have them in residential districts, small lot residential districts. And the interesting thing about DeSoto's Old Town area, there are some larger lots in those areas too that are over an acre. So you could still probably figure out a way to do it. So that's kind of where we're at with this. And then I guess what Patrick and we talked about it, and the suggestion in your staff report is to, once again, put a time frame on it. If you don't declare your goat with a written permit of some sort, we probably charge $1 or something very insignificant, and say you're declaring we've got a goat and you've got a certain goats, certain amount of time, and then they do need to conform to the policy. So they'll be essentially grandfathered into the community. So you can see there's a lot of support for our goat friends in DeSoto. But is this once again a policy decision we want to make to allow livestock in residential districts, small lot residential districts? And typically a small lot in DeSoto is not, I don't know if it's specifically defined, but 1 acre or less than an acre, because you have to have a septic system, you have to have 1 acre of buildable property. So that's kind of where we draw the line, is at the 1 acre mark. However, the Planning Commission 7 or 8 years ago said 2 acres for livestock. So that's kind of where we're at now. And once again, here we are back trying to thread the needle on how to approach this, because the council's once again asked the Planning Commission to study this and make a recommendation.
I just want to know if these are really the goats. Are these the goats? They're very good looking goats.
They're cute little goats.
I didn't know how you got them to pose for a picture. It's very, very
They are.
well-behaved goats.
I know they're referenced as livestock, but they really are my pets. They are,
very good pets.
yeah.
Yeah, which brings me to the point that I don't like the, after 3 years, they've got to get rid of them because they are pets. Nobody wants to get rid of their pets. And if they haven't been causing a problem before, I'd like to put it back so that, you know, if they do become a problem and something changes, we could have some recourse, but I don't like to put a deadline on it myself.
But 3 years seemed pretty random. I don't know if that was,
I don't want a deadline in there at all, because if they're your pet, nobody wants to have to get rid of their pet, and these are obviously their pets, so that's my feeling. Okay. My other suggestion is that, and there again, we're not just talking about this specific case, we're talking about anybody else that might want to do it, so I'd like to see more information put on there about, the owner of the animal shall not allow animal waste to gather and remain on the premises. I've had goats before, and I know if you don't take care of them, that can get a little messy. So they'd be responsible for making sure their conditions are sanitary and no objectionable odors. And make sure they're properly contained, because if they do get out, sometimes they like to climb on things, so.
Can I make a comment? This
Yeah.
is Patrick.
go ahead.
So just to be clear on this, our entire objective here was to protect these goats at this location. So we're essentially saying that if you have goats that are not the pygmy goats, and there is some trouble with the language. The language I had given to Brad says goats, but excluding the breed Nigerian pygmy, since they're addressed elsewhere. But anyway, the thought being that, and that's why I asked the question at the council meeting, are we aware of any other goats in town? Because these goats are, I mean, they're large animals, and it does seem to be the consensus of the council, and it sounds like the planning commission, we don't want to disrupt what is already there. But the problem that we have to get our head around is goats, generally speaking, there has to be 2 goats. So in this situation, if we pass this revision, they would be protected, but then what do you do if one of these goats dies and the property owner wants to buy a second goat to keep the first goat company, then it would perpetuate. So, you know, if we can figure out a way to address that, I think, you know, we could solve. But again, this was geared towards this property, towards these goats, because our thought was that the size of these goats, they're probably just not conducive to, you know, small residential lots throughout the city.
So, can you clarify the 3-year verbiage in here? Are you saying that they would just have to reapply after 3 years, or?
It says they'll be removed.
Well, that's what I don't, that kind of contradicts what Patrick was saying, was like, yeah, so I'm just kind of wondering.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if Brad has done that, but my thought was we would talk to the owners and figure out, like, I don't even know you know, how long goats live, but obviously, since we're crafting this for this property, we want to make sure whatever we do works for the property owner, and certainly I'm willing to talk through with them, you know, what, like, for example, the size of the shed. I don't, you know, we'd want to make sure it matches up with whatever shed they have there, so, so anyway, I think definitely that's a step we need to take, is talk to the owners, and then, yeah, the trouble we were having is just how do we address the one goat dies, and then do you just allow the one goat, not any new goats, or do you allow another replacement goat?
So Patrick, is this specific, we are not really talking about making any changes, we're just talking about this specific case, period.
Well, the change would be to allow this specific case, because
But-
you have to have goats in the city by the certain date.
I know.
Yeah, we would have a few changes. And one thing that did come up is this whole dehorning thing. I do agree with a lot of the information that's been presented, that we probably ought to take that out of the requirement if you're going to have a Nigerian pygmy goat or a miniature goat.
The dehorning's bad form.
Yeah, it's really, if they have the space to roam,
Yeah.
they're okay.
So, and part of this comes from with zoning, you can't stop zone. So we couldn't pass a regulation saying, you know, this address is zoned to have goats or allowed. You can't do that. So what Kansas court cases have said you can do is what's set out here, where you indicate that essentially this use on X date, and that's what we're doing. So if there is another property owner in the city that we don't know about that has the same goats, they could take advantage of this. But our understanding is there is not. So essentially, it is just applying.
So we're basically grandfathering them in, these people.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And not making any other changes except the dehorning.
Sounds like it.
So there's no
Well, what
permit
about the
requirement
deadline?
for having the goats? It's an inherent use?
I guess, yeah, it would be, I mean, obviously, we know where those goats are, so it's not any kind of mystery, but, and we could require them to just put a little affidavit and sign it and say, I've got 2 goats at this address, and their names are Kevin and Steve, and
The proposal is permitted for a one-time period of 3 years, so I don't think it's designed to be like a renewable special use permit or anything.
no, it was not.
What's the life expectancy of a goat?
About 40.
About 40?
Just saying, it's a lot longer than 3.
They're hardy animals.
How old are they now?
30.
What if we had a permit that said that you wouldn't be able to replace one if you lost one?
That's tough, because what do you do with the other one? You know what's gonna happen is
They'll
if
start
one
acting
dies
up.
and there's only one left, all it's gonna do is try to escape.
Yeah.
They'll make
Yeah.
noises and
Yes.
all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't.
It sounds like a 3-year permit doesn't help you much. Larry, if you don't mind, would you mind, for the record, coming and give us your name and so we can get your comments on here?
Larry Baxter. I live at 8510 Wea Street, the goat residence.
Right. Thank you.
So they're pygmy goats, and which are allowed on the 2 acres, which I did not look at when we bought them. I looked at, are they allowed in the city? Yes, so we got the 2 goats. Well, we got one, and it was a gift, so we got the other one because you have to. And we've had them it's gonna be coming up on 4 years. It's, we've passed the 3-year mark, but we're getting there. And we never had a problem with them. All our neighbors watch them, they enjoy them. People come take pictures with them. It would just be devastating for us to lose them or move.
So Larry, there was a question about whether these goats are actually pygmy goats. And I don't know if that just has to do with definitions or not.
They absolutely are. One's a Nigerian dwarf, which is actually smaller than a pygmy, and the other one's a miniature,
Okay.
Lamacha.
So is that distinction something we might be able to do away with? Well, Nigerian pygmy goats, but we'll make an exception to that as opposed to opening up a category for all goats that aren't Nigerian pygmies, because apparently you think they are.
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
So, Larry, can you explain, I guess, I'm not familiar with goats at all, I'll be honest with you. So what happens if you only have one? What happens with the other goat?
Well, they're considered a herd animal, so if it's going to look for another one somewhere.
Okay,
They're like cattle.
gotcha.
Cattle do the same thing. So when we bought that first one, first thing it did is get out.
Okay.
So we bought the other one, never had a problem since.
So you need two, regardless.
And I'd like to say something on the horn thing too. You know how your dog pants when it's hot? That's how a goat releases its heat in the summer. It's through its horns.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Wow.
It's a little more devastating to dehorn them than one would think.
Got it.
So how much do these goats weigh?
Between 40 and 50. Same as my dog.
I'll say no bigger
Are
than a
they-
big dog.
Under 23 inches, or are they?
Yes. I mean, they eat. That's all they do. So they're almost as wide as they are tall.
So I think I heard you correct. You said these goats will live 40 years, right?
It's coming up on, it's somewhere, it's close to 4 years.
But they'll live how long? 40 years?
40,
Yeah.
yeah. They can. I'm not saying they all
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
but yeah.
So this weight limit and height limit we've got is reasonable?
Yeah, they fall under that. We fall under everything but the 2 acres. And which if you look, I don't know if it's on these, but a pygmy goat only needs 200 square foot.
Yeah, I think that the acreage is
Yeah.
is a noise issue.
Yeah, and most pygmy goats and minis there's no screaming minis or pygmies. That,
That's
you
good to
know,
know.
they bay a little bit and only when she comes outside.
So do they graze or do you feed them grain?
We grain, hay, they got their own, they got a almost 200 square foot house, and then there's a separate little hay bin.
And they do graze.
I don't have to pick up leaves in the back.
Could we borrow them?
Yeah, I don't weed eat the fence either.
Oh, please, here.
Thank you, Larry. Anybody else have questions for Larry? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, it seems to me that as a discussion item, this is probably what we can do tonight, but I would encourage staff to go back and kind of see if what's being proposed is even workable for this situation. Sounds to me like a 3-year time limit may or may not necessarily satisfy this particular, and I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, I think replacing, if you lose one, I understand the wisdom of replacing them, but you kind of perpetuate it then. And the part of the problem is, this is a special deal that's basically because you have an existing use that, hasn't been objectionable, but letting it proliferate could be a problem. And so you kind of have to think about how that's going to work. And, it would seem to me that the most reasonable solution on that would be that you have the goats, but you're not allowed to replace them. So when you lose one, you got to find someplace for the other one. But that would be my take on it, and maybe there's a better solution. I don't know what it would be, but I think allowing it to perpetuate indefinitely is probably a potential problem. So I certainly would encourage staff to try to come up with something that works, but 3 years sounds like it's a little short.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. Could we do something like a special use thing on here so that if, as long as there's no complaints, they could,
Maybe for the replacement goat, if they want to do a replacement, they'll have to petition for it.
because I don't like the idea.
But even then, I mean, it's an awfully special deal that they're doing for you. And other people in the city are like, well, why are you doing this for Larry and not for me? It's like, well, that's a problem.
I get
So
it.
it's a tough balancing act, but I do get the idea. Does anybody have any real desire to fight about whether dehorning is important?
No, not at all.
Okay,
Especially with his explanation, that's.
I get it.
It'd be like making you or I wear a stocking cap in the middle of summer.
Hey, not a good call. Any other discussion on this, or do you feel like you got what you need, Brad? You need something more from us?
Got enough to get us through the next meeting at least.
Okay. We look anxiously anticipate discussing goats again.
Well, I was also thinking, it's interesting, we've got this mural with a big goat on it, so we ought to try to find
I
a way
agree.
to.
We're sort of advertising it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 7B, discuss cul-de-sacs.
All right.
Streets.
Thank you, Chair. Now, this is another interesting item that's come up because we had several property owners approach myself about cul-de-sac lengths, and this is where
Just need to note that Commissioner Milburn ran
so two of the locations are large lot tracts on the east side of DeSoto. As you can imagine, if you got 20, 30, 40 acres and you want to do large lots, by the time you weave a road back there, and if you don't have as you know, DeSoto's rather hilly out east, and it makes it hard to make connections to our road network. And so you have a cul-de-sac in there, and it makes it only limits, you can only go so far. I guess the thing in my mind was thinking, if you've got, a minimum of 1 acre, 2 acre, maybe even 3, 4 acre lots, I mean, how much traffic is it really going to be? We have that requirement because if something happened, fire engines trying to get there, and who knows, somebody panics and something happens, car flips over, and now the fire truck can't get to where it's supposed to go. Stranger things have happened, so that's why those types of requirements are there. And when we have the fire code says anything that have more than 30 residents, you have to have 2 access points. So those are why those are in place, because there are situations where for safety reasons and human health reasons, you have these codes and restrictions. But when you think about a large lot subdivision, how many is at a point? You could have 30 lots on a tract on a single cul-de-sac or less, and probably not have any kind of issues. And we actually do have several areas in the eastern part of DeSoto that exceed actually in the RO district, we have 1,000 feet is what we have for.
We don't have anybody that exceeds that, do we?
Yeah, we do.
Really?
Actually, there's a few. I mean, not much. I mean, there's 1,600, one's like almost 2,000.
But
By the time you wind all the way, what's that?
They only have like 2 or 3 houses in there, don't they?
Yeah, if you know where that Taylor Court ravens is, and then there's, I think, Brome Drive also as a cul-de-sac that goes back quite a ways. It kind of turns left. The Ravenswood area up there, it's up on top of the hill. Those all exceed 1,000
I
feet.
suppose that's true, because it goes down and it has a T, and it kind of goes down again.
So you've got some of those situations, and certainly in denser subdivisions, like Arbor Ridge or Primrose area, that, we've got a 500-foot max on those cul-de-sac lengths, and that's for that reason. I guess the other thing is, Sheila Dalrymple's here. She's one of the landowners that have been talking to me about this. Is they have a concept of a sort of a family communal farm, and the first 400 feet is roughly going to be part of this communal farm. So they're going to have 400 feet where they're burning up that distance of their cul-de-sac. There won't be any residents there, so they're kind of penalized a little bit for wanting to come up with this unique approach to allowing large lot subdivision. So looking at our code, and I went through and talked to Patrick about it. I mean, we do have some clauses, and a lot of this is just a lot of it's just for your information, because I think there's at least my interpretation of reading it. And I went and talked to Patrick about it. Is this right that the Planning Commission can't approve cul-de-sac lengths longer than 1,000 feet for the RO district and other districts, actually, but they've got to talk to city engineer, city staff, the fire chief. There's a lot of checks and balances. And a lot of times by the time you get through those, if we don't agree and they still want to push it to Planning Commission, generally speaking, you've backed up city staff and said, no, we're going to allow our professionals that we have here in the city's recommendation to stop that process. So most of the time when we have these discussions with developers and we say your cul-de-sac's too long or something like that, they'll make arrangements and changes. Now, the other location that has come up and where this comes into play is the Mr. Goodsense property. Owner there has some plans for developing potentially storage units farther down. We used to be Mr. Goodsense Drive. I think it's 91st Street. Joe Bazone, and sure enough, if you go any much farther than what he has now, you're blowing past that 500-foot distance. And you've got self-storage down there. I mean, they're just not heavily used. You know, a lot of times they're kind of, the few times that I've had to use them, when I went to my unit, I mean, I didn't see a soul out there, and I'd be there in a, you know, you'd think a Saturday afternoon, people would be getting stuff out of their units or whatever. I mean, there's nobody
Nice
there,
storage.
you know? So, so that's kind of the other issue is, because we've got, in this instance, a very deep, a narrow but fairly deep lot, has the ability for utilities, electricity, the water, the sewer, everything's there. But if you have this rule that says, I'm sorry, 500 feet and you're done, all of a sudden Joe Bazzone's got several acres back there he can't do anything with. And, you know, when I've looked at different cul-de-sac lengths around, I mean, they vary. They really do. Once again, we talk about arbitrary numbers, whether it's 3 years, 2 years, 2-year rollovers for special use permits. You know, what? There's somebody that's got one that's completely odd and different. I've seen them up to almost 1,800 feet. So one I remember was 1,320 feet. And I'm like, well, how in the world did they come up with these different lengths? And to me, it really boils down to, it's kind of that fire safety issue. My thinking was, initially was, you could have 1,500 foot long cul-de-sac in the RO district, which with you have 100-foot frontage, you can get 30 homes and that's it. So you would still meet the 30 or less for the single access point. But then when I kind of looked at this and talked to Patrick, his thinking was the way the code's written, planning commission can approve longer than that. So at this point, I guess I'm just trying to bring this up because this is kind of swirling around out there. You might very well have a preliminary plat or a site plan that shows this, and just want to sort of bring you up to speed on what we're thinking is could be a challenging issue, because we are kind of going against some of the norms out there. But on the other hand, if the use itself is going to be very low intensity and low travel, is that necessarily the right approach to saying, I'm sorry, 500 feet, and I don't care if you've got 25 acres of developable light industrial ground, you can't get to it. Or 40 acres and you want to do a communal farm and you've used up half of your length through the farm area, which is sort of your drawing for this whole development, is to have this kind of approach to living. So,
Well, it's not the 40-acre tract that's the issue, because typically a 40-acre tract, you'd probably build some kind of internal traffic flow with that.
right, but
That's not
yeah,
what we're talking
you're
about.
right.
We're
But
talking about
the
the
thing
10
is, when you
acres,
look
the
at
20
yeah,
acres that
when you look at
someone's
some of
gotta
these
squeeze in.
tracks and the way they're all shaped, and you know the terrain, and with Kill Creek and Cedar Creek and Captain's Creek, you just can't get to them. You just can't make it work.
Yeah.
And so either they're going to sit there vacant in perpetuity, or we allow some sort of access point. I mean, we went through that whole thing with that private development. They've got potentially 5 lots on their private drive goes well beyond 1,000 feet, because it's 1,000 feet up to their gate, and then they go back. So once again, this is just my thinking of trying to find a way where we can get something going on the east side of DeSoto, knowing there's probably never going to be sewers. We'll never have dense development there. So you want to give property owners or people that have creative ideas, like Ms. Dalrymple, to, hey, let's do something back here. Let's kind of find an interesting approach that can make DeSoto have another type of living style, type of aspect of our community that makes us more unique, rather than just cookie cutter subdivision, you know, office park, Home Depot, Walmart, subdivision, you know, et cetera.
So are you feeling that the variance opportunity doesn't give staff enough to kind of work with these folks?
Not necessarily going to the BZA, because one of the things, the criteria, and also Commissioner Lane's on the BZA, so she gets to hear all this again. But if the applicant brings the request, that's really kind of
Well, this isn't a BZA variance. This would be a variance granted.
Oh, okay, all right, so I was thinking that, all right.
No, so you mean, the
Yeah,
language
the planning
that we have
commission
right
can,
now, we have that.
that, you
Are
have that
saying
ability.
That's not adequate to address this?
No, I think it is adequate in my thinking, but I just, right now, this is just bringing it up because if we showed up tomorrow with a 1,800-foot cul-de-sac, I think you'd probably, all of you would say, are you out of your minds? What are you doing?
Well, I wouldn't. If
Okay.
it's a unique
That's 'cause you're
opportunity
there.
to utilize property that otherwise wouldn't be utilized, I have faith that my fellow commissioners would see logic in that. But if you're telling me that we need to make a rule.
No, I don't think we,
longer
actually, I don't think we need to
cul-de-sacs.
change anything. I think I'm just bringing this up because we've got three pending applications that are gonna show up and they're gonna have more than a fairly significant length of cul-de-sac, which might be a little, I don't know, maybe a little
Well,
disturbing, odd. It's just,
I mean,
you know,
for me, it has a lot more to do with how many units are being built on that cul-de-sac.
Right.
And, you know, I live in Oak Country, and we've had times where one of the access points is closed, and you'd have thought the world had ended. So I can't even imagine living in a long cul-de-sac and having the only way out to be that particular road. And certainly if you've got 25 homes, that's a whole lot of people that got to get out. So, you know, my reservation would be a lot more with the density you're putting on that cul-de-sac. But that's me.
but that's our, you know, the fire code says 30 units or less.
Yeah, 29 would probably be too many for me if you got an 1,800-foot cul-de-sac.
Yeah. But you're talking about that point, you know, you might have 150 feet of frontage per lot. So,
get
I
it.
mean, that's pretty spread out.
But also, there may be more than one way to address that, and you might be able to do something where you can actually create a U or something else that creates 2 points of access. I don't know. I mean, I personally love the fact that DeSoto has the ability for people to do unique housing that is not cookie cutter. I think it's great. I think that's part of the attraction of the town, and I don't want to discourage that. That said, my concern is that the more we're doing this, the more we're creating small lot size front footage and those kinds of things, the more we're actually creating ways for us to create too intense developments for the areas that we really have traditionally enjoyed having a large areas to work with. And so, you know, that'll be where my flag gets raised on this, is where somebody's trying to squeeze in a 30-unit subdivision on a cul-de-sac just because it's cheaper than actually building 2 points of access. So that's going to be my problem.
Yeah, well, the two applicants that I've talked to that want to do these large lots, I don't think their issue is trying to squeeze in as many lots. Yeah, they want to have as many lots as they can, but they're not overdoing it. They're not showing up with, you know, 29 or 30 units. They're significantly less than that, but one of them at 1,000 feet and 200-foot little spurs off of there. So it's, you know, one of them is 1,200 feet. And it's like, well, you know, that's kind of outside the bounds. It's of what we would typically approve for the RO district. And then as I start looking into this, well, the planning commission has the ability to approve that. Now, we would have obviously Joe's input, Fire Marshal Cameron's input, Chief Maxton's input, myself, Mike's. Before we would even, we would definitely move forward with a recommendation that city staff agreed with before we would. And if it were a split vote between city staff, it's not going anywhere.
I don't have a problem with that. What do you guys think?
I think I would probably look at the nature of the project, you know, if there's a, you know, because even the fire marshal's requirement for 30 lots on one entrance, I don't think would apply if there's a future second entrance. Not that it's built at the time, but, so if a piece of property has options and the resident, for whatever reason, or the developer, for whatever reason, doesn't want to utilize that option, that's when I would probably be more inclined to restrict that length.
Right, and that's what we required with that Countryside Farms was, we gave them one access point, but they widened the road and they showed a future access point on 95th Street. But some of these lots may not be able to, because of the nature of the east side, there isn't something near to just say, hey, we're gonna tie in over here. You just can't get there.
Essentially, if it makes the entire property and not the entire property, if it makes using the entire property unusable, because there's no alternative for access, then that's the time I would say, yeah, we can, I would support.
Mark speaks for me.
Okay.
Sounds good, yeah.
I expect the planning commission will be reasonable with that too, so I don't have a real problem with that, doing it by variance unless you're telling us that in order to do what staff needs to do with these, we need to change that requirement of the 1,000-foot limitation. I mean, to me, if it's more than 1,000 feet, we ought to look at it because it's a special case.
Makes sense to me.
So anyway, all this to say, stay tuned because it's swirling around out there. It may not amount to anything, but I wanted you all to be informed as to
Okay.
what we talk about at the staff level quite a bit of time.
Want to grab Justin? I believe that concludes the published agenda. Anything anybody wants to talk about? I have a question. Did Dustin talk to you about using that property that he just got rezoned to give him another access point to the apartments?
Yeah, we did talk about that in
I
length.
was thinking the same thing.
Yes. And that was part of his
'Cause
plan when I
was
talked
stubbed in
about.
that way on the plat, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And we did talk about that with, it had a preliminary layout for the storage units and it had a access from Commerce Drive into the residences of Lexington.
Anybody else have gripes, complaints?
Our troublemaker.
You're the one who wants to go by the rules.
Better hurry, yeah. 'cause
Make
we
sure to
got
get two. With that, then I think we take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, we're adjourned.